was filed on the House side, which I didn't know was different on the Senate. That's good to know. So then we are also looking to bring in subject matter experts for the hearing. And we have, it's been excellent actually for the geolocation tracking piece, because it's all around the country. Folks are waking up to this going on. And there's interest in legislation being filed, but there's only a few real good experts, and we've been able to connect with those folks and are bringing them down for the hearing and to talk to our legislators, and so they can hear from the people who know everything about it. And so that's an important piece. Then,
is this the last step?
This is the last.
We might have to move on. Okay,
sure.
Go ahead then.
So after this session, what we're going to do, like everyone else, is to prepare for 2015. And instead of doing the research and reports, or rather a different way of doing the research that we're looking at is open records requests, which also are very easy to initiate. Basically, it takes a stamp, say, give me this. And so it's not quite that easy as far as the process, because it kind of becomes a Kafkaesque maze of sorts, with all sorts of resistance, but that's really telling as well. So what we want to do is, well, I won't get into what we're going to be looking for because it's interesting, but we want to do this on a mass scale. And so I want to direct your attention to a group called Muckrock News. They are looking to actually automate, in some sense, the open records request process and do it in a way where they provide you with basic language for it all. Like, you go to their website, you say you want to reach out to this agency, and they send off the request. They have the entire calendar, which is very, very important as far as the number of business days that they have to respond to here. And then after this point, if they get any response back, they automatically scan it and do the OCR recognition, post it online, which is also important because that's that accountability.
Sounds like a very powerful tool.
So
maybe someone can follow up on that during questioning.
Sure.
And we do have one thing before we go to open audience participation, and this is a challenge to the forum. The question is, what can one individual who is not a paid activist or works a 9-to-5 job, has children, what is the one thing, and I'm looking for a one-word answer, if possible, that that person can do that is powerful and effective for whatever their cause of greatest concern might be? And we are going to start with you, Greg. So, one-word answer?
Concerned about one word.
Well, I know it's hard to condense everything into one word, so I'm sorry to not give you warning.
No, it's hard for me to not blabber on a little bit. So, I think it's conquering fear. It's not any particular thing. It's conquering fear and apathy. I'm reading a book right now by the, no, I can't tell you.
Sorry, that was already more than one word.
So,
question time after this, so I promise.
Show up.
Aside from show up, I'd say phone calls. Alerting legislators that you're for or against certain bills, because that's one of the few ways we can actually weigh in before the decisions are made or before the final vote happens. If we don't have a radioactive level of public outcry on certain bills, there's no stopping the train. So I would say phone calls.
Thank you.
Politely post something on their Facebook page. They have paid staffers that sit there and monitor their Facebook page all day long. Post something on their Facebook page. Be polite about it.
Thank you.
Vote.
That's mine too, but I would say really quickly, I think along with that, this, as libertarians, you all have an interesting kind of leverage with the legislature, because I think just about every mainstream Republican that is in office at the Ledge is a little bit worried about a libertarian coming into their primary. Yeah. So I think that, I'm not saying you should threaten anybody or anything like that, but A, you should vote, but B, you should also think about ways that you can encourage them to take your agenda into the agenda they're forwarding. I think you all are really particularly well placed in the political system. So.
Thank you.
I think my one word would be educate. And like I said, our packet that we sent to the legislators is called an education package. So I think it's an important approach. And I furthered that in my mind, confirmed that in my mind. I was putting together letters to go to our members
telling them whether their legislator is on the fence or supportive or against. And I had to rephrase it in my mind and change that letter to, instead of being your member, your representative is against this, instead now this is the education letter to me. Your member needs to be educated on whatever the specific thing is. Just a different way of thinking about it.
Thank you. Good. So now we are going to open it up for audience participation. I see multiple hands already. The way this is going to work is we're going to keep the mics up here, so you have to project. Introduce yourself. Well, I get. State your question. If you're with an organization, state that. Please just ask the question, not lots of background. And tell us who your question is directed towards, or if it's everyone on the panel. So the very first hand I saw was Ben Farmer.
Thank you, Proctor, for recognizing my question. I'm Ben Farmer, Libertarian representative from Odessa, Texas. My question is for Mr. Simpson. I'm curious if he is familiar with the Austin-based group Peaceful Streets Project, and what is it finally going to take for the ACLU to get intimately involved in the Austin Police Department corruption?
Well.
Well, thanks for having me. I think that we have tried in the past to work with local activists on those issues, and in the past couple of years we haven't been as involved as we should be in that particular issue. I think that one thing that you should take heart about is that we're actually hiring a community organizer located in our Austin office in the next 3 months who will be trained in and start working here, and that's exactly the kind of stuff we need a community organizer for. So, and I think it is an important issue.
May I suggest Antonio Beeler?
Yes, we consider him considered.
I have Pat Dixon, and then over there, and then Jim. So let's go Pat first.
Pat Dixon, I'm the state chair of the party. This is for the whole panel. Is there something typically that somebody could, at a hearing, they could say or do that's going to hurt your cause? They may be in favor of what you're doing, but you're like, oh, please don't say this, please don't do that. Any advice you would give people?
I just check with the author ahead of time. I think the author or the sponsor would be my response. But
I just think being on point with what the bill actually does. I just went to my first committee hearing, and I didn't even intend to testify because I thought I'd be running over straight from work at the end of the day. But the last person, who we thought was going to be the last person, was in so many places that no one could really follow him, at least, after being there for 3 hours. So I think being considerate, and I wouldn't have gone up, but for that fact, I went up only just because that couldn't be what the last thing was in their minds. And the chairman afterwards even said that was good that you did that, because he was even thinking the same thing, that don't do this. This is going to be the last thing we hear. So I think we all have a lot we want to say, but I try to, in my own group, try to remind people what it looks like when a car drives down the road and has every space covered in a bumper sticker. That you might like some of the sentiments, but it's really hard to get a hold of it. So you have to be really concise and ask yourself, does this information I'm relaying to these professionals who are at work relate to these 2 pieces of paper that are in front of them? That's all this bill does. That's all they care about. That's what they want to get through. And the personal stories are great, but they're even more impactful if the bill would actually affect that personal story.
Does anybody else have something now?
Yeah. Don't interrupt the representatives when you're testifying. It drives them crazy. They think that they should not ever be interrupted, and so they won't listen to you, unfortunately. And then the other thing is try not to accuse them of anything. I was at a hearing, along those lines. That's the only thing they'll remember. I was at a hearing on a bill, and someone started accusing all of the members of the committee of being racist. And whether or not that's true, that's the only thing they're going to remember from that person. They're not going to remember all the excellent points they made on that bill. The only thing they're going to walk around saying is, okay, that person thinks I'm a racist. So, demeanor and messaging is very, very important with politicians and their egos.
I was going to say that too. One of the things, like on, for instance, the Sunset Bill, They're usually several hundred pages long, and there's a lot of things you have to cover, and you only get 3 minutes. Sometimes they'll cut you down to even 2 minutes. So what we'll do is if we have a group of activists up there to testify, we will split up the areas of concern among us all so that they don't hear just the same 3 things from 20 people. A lot of times it's better if you use variety in your approach to the legislators so that you can have some people cover this, some people cover that, and you kind of work your whole agenda that way. And I would definitely follow up and say that you don't want to insult them. You need to be polite, even though we know that they can be absolute, like Red Army something or others. You know, it's like you have to hold your tongue and be gracious in how you deliver it, because I think that's how they really take you seriously on a policy level. Is if you're, polite in how you approach them and not, accusing them of being different things. But I think one other thing that I always worry about on tolling is that there's tolling that we feel is permissible and tolling that is not. And so the worst thing for me is when I go up there and someone says, well, I'd be okay with it if you just, and I'm like, oh God, here we go. Because they basically just gave them permission to move the bill. And when you're trying to kill a bill, you don't want to give them any excuses to move that bill if they do some little tweak to it. Because most of the time, your nice little tweaks that they say, okay, we'll put the public vote in there, and then suddenly we'll make it okay that we're ripping you off. Yeah. They pull the public vote out in conference. You are never going to get those things that they promise you, I've found, and they will rip it out so fast. So to us, if there's a bill we're trying to kill, just work with us on killing the bill, or work with us on moving a bill, rather than trying to say, well, I'd be okay if we, and if you're kind of doing this negotiated, if they see one sliver of weakness, they are going to exploit it. So I would just caution you to make sure you know, at least from a grassroots point of view, what it is we want you to focus on or say, and kind of stick with that, because sometimes you can actually make it worse to come up there and kind of give them wiggle room. So anyway.
Thank you.
I'll just add one process note that I thought was interesting, is that you don't actually have to go and testify in person. You can go ahead and put in written comments. You basically go to where the hearing is at. They have cards at the back. You can put down your name, whether you support or oppose the bill, and then you have written comments. Just make copies for all of the committee members, and you hand the papers and the card to the clerk, and that's it.
They also have in the House this year an electronic registration for bills. So usually about an hour, depends on the committee, but usually about an hour before the committee is scheduled to begin. Like if you have to go to work, you can't stick around for a committee, but you want to say, I do not want this bill, or I really am in favor of this bill, I want it passed. You can go to the Capitol, you can just do the meters even, because you can just, and in the Capitol parking garage, you can get the first 2 hours free. So if you want to run in, register for a bill, and then go to work, you can do that now, and you don't have to wait for the cards. The Senate still does a card-based system, so you still have to just go a few minutes before the committee hearing.
I'm sorry, could it be a little quieter out there? We've got noisy all of a sudden. Let's not do that.
But the kiosks are great. It will record your name and address and organization name and everything, so you can just basically click a button and it'll fill it all in for you after you've done it one time. You can save your information, and you can just go down the list and you can leave. You don't even have to be staying at the Capitol all day and do oral testimony. And so it's made it really easy for the public to weigh in.
Yes, that does make it much easier. James Golston? Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yeah, I'm Alan Patterson, Chair of the Tarrant County Libertarian Party. I have a question for Terri with Turf. Do you guys get involved with federal transportation projects?
Absolutely.
Are you familiar with CSA 2010?
No, what is that?
It's a comprehensive driver safety reform package. It involves whether the driver has paid his child support.
Oh boy.
I want to...
Things of that nature. I was wondering if you guys legislated on the federal level at all with transportation issues.
Yes, we have dabbled a little. It's a very big animal to steer, because even though Texas is a big state and we have a lot of representatives from our state, it's really hard when you have 49 other states that you have to deal with. But we do work our delegation. For instance, I know who the House Transportation Subcommittee members are who represents us in the Senate committee, and that sort of a thing. And then we work with those members and let them know what we want, and particularly the federal highway bill. That's pretty much the only thing we've had time to deal with. But we're very opposed to Agenda 21, sustainable development, all the stuff that threatens our freedom to travel at every level. We try and fight it everywhere we see it. And so a lot of that's going to be in bills other than the federal transportation bill, but that's the one that usually takes up all our time. MAP 21 passed last summer, and we were very involved in that.
Okay, thank you.
Jim Stutzman?
I'm Jim Stutzman, Libertarian Committee member. Thanks for coming, and my question is for Mr. Foster. Now, technology is a good thing in general, I think, and I'm positive, as is everyone in the room, there's tons of junk coming down that we must stop because of that. But have we considered, and can we write something that would be a law that these Hanyaks thinks is so good, that if you abuse this technology in a certain way, well then maybe you ought to do 20 years.
Well, it depends on what you mean by abuse, I think. And I think that there's so many different facets, pieces of the puzzle.
Can I define abuse?
Sure.
Anything that affects our liberty, our property, and our freedom. That's abuse. It goes against the Constitution or the Bill of Rights.
Well, I think that what we're seeing here recently is actually that the Constitution is kind of on a roll, I guess is one way to put it. You're seeing actually federal judges around the country who are starting to step up. And actually, National EFF had a pretty remarkable victory yesterday at the federal level where, do y'all know what national security letters are? These are the gag orders that the FBI can issue with a subpoena that says that the telecommunication provider has to fork over the subscriber data, and they're not allowed to tell the customer. They're not allowed to speak publicly about it at all. It's, I believe it came along with the Patriot Act. And yesterday at the federal level, they just ruled that national security letters are unconstitutional.
Yeah.
So there's a 90-day period where the Department of Justice can appeal, which wouldn't that be interesting? And but there's a lot of examples like that around the country, actually. I can give you several more, but basically I feel like the pendulum's swinging back in the direction of a little more sanity about all this.
Thank you. More questions? I saw your hand first.
This is really for all six of you. What are you doing out there to get juries to do their jobs? I mean, with groups like the Fully Informed Jury Associations and so on. Because a lot of this stuff could be nullified if juries would just do their jobs.
Well, in case of transportation, the litigation that we've pursued generally doesn't go to a jury trial. A lot of them are administrative type hearings, like the National Environmental Policy Act is the federal law that we've sued under and won every time, by the way. And on that one, it is administrative law. So most everything's just done back and forth with briefs between lawyers. We're not even usually in court on that one. There was one case where we sued TxDOT for their taxpayer-funded lobbying, which violates state law. And that one didn't go to a jury because the state has all these fun little mechanisms that allow them to do a fast-track appeal. It completely, to me, violates due process and our constitutional rights. It needs to be challenged, but I don't have the money and resources to do it just yet, but I will if I can. And that is where basically before you even have your case heard in court at the trial level, they can kick you up to the appeals court by this thing called plea to the jurisdiction, which is where the state claims sovereign immunity and that they are basically immune from the consequences of the decisions. And so anyway, it kicks you up to appeals court before you even get the chance to have a jury trial. So there's a lot of things, at least in our world, where I would love a jury trial, because I'm pretty sure that I could get the jury to agree with what we're saying.
Well, I think some of the other organizations might deal more directly with juries, right? Or jury education efforts?
I would just say real briefly that in the criminal world, 96, 97, 98% of all cases are dealt with plea deals rather than the jury. So we think it's a lot more effective to make sure the law is in the right place rather than waiting for the small minority of cases that do go to the jury.
Are we?
Just basically the same thing. I mean, we encourage people to take it to a jury, but most people just can't afford the time and the expense of doing so. And if somebody will go to a jury, I mean, we will be there. We've been there, and it makes news when they do. If somebody will fight it all the way and they can get an attorney to go with them to go to court and go to a jury for 2 grams, then we'll be right there with them. But it just doesn't happen very often. People face 10 years or a felony, and then they're offered probation, they're going to take probation. So it just doesn't happen enough for us to affect much there.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to do Ken Stanford and then one question after that.
I got a question.
Okay, Ken.
Okay, my question is for Ms. Terri Hall. Have you ever thought about taking on the DOT for the double jeopardy of fines inflicted on DUI cases, whether or not they are found guilty?
You know, we have not delved into anything having to do with DUI. We just don't have the resources really, because we're just so buried under all the other stuff we're doing. But I can tell you that we are looking at some federal challenges, because the interstate highway system, when it was first conceived by President Eisenhower back in the 50s, it was all about facilitating commerce. And now we're seeing, it was facilitating commerce, but ultimately it was for national defense first. That was the whole purpose of the interstate highway system. And now with this slice and dice and this chopping up of our highway system into toll and non-toll and the strict restrictions that are coming down on our travel, we think that there's going to be some ripe cases for really coming at them on just right to travel in general, because all of those things are being eroded very, very quickly. Pretty much every state is doing the same thing. And we're dealing with, I mean, multi-billions of dollars of public works projects, and that's what makes sometimes transportation really, really tough to fight, because you're going against all the, what I call banksters and all the bond guys and all the, Goldman Sachs and everybody else. I mean, that's who's crawling all over our highway department all the time, and that keeps us rather busy before we even delve into the DUI aspect, but maybe some other panelist has an idea on that.
I say take it to the media and make it sexy for them. Nothing like standing in front of the media and sticking to your talking points. Stick to those 1 points, those 2 points or 3 points, and just hammer them down with those talking points. Man, there's a bill right now before a legislator where if you have a concealed handgun license, you're held to a much higher standard. So a police officer can get charged with a crime, and still keep their badge and a gun. The CHO holder can lose their license. If they will lose it if it's charged, and they will lose it, for 7 years if it's revoked. But a police officer, they can still keep their badge and gun and stay on the job. If you have a concealed handgun license and an officer stops you, determines that you're intoxicated, not .08, not .07, not 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, smelled alcohol on your presence, then they can say that they can charge you with unlawful carrying. And so we're trying to get that removed. And I say, I hammered them. I hit DPS up last week on the news because they're taking a long time to process, applications and stuff like that. So I try to make it sexy for the media. Try to make it sexy for them. Say, and hammer them, hit them hard. Do you know that when I hit them so hard on a Thursday, by Monday they gave me what we were looking for on Monday. So hit them in the media.
Thank you. Mr. Rowland, do you have a question?
Yes.
I'm so sorry I didn't see that earlier.
Genre at Constitution.org. What place in your agendas do you have for holding individual officials accountable by penetrating official immunity and doing such things as opening grand juries to direct complaints from citizens?
Is the question clear to the panel?
Well, I've actually had a lot of people contact me about doing the grand jury method for the taxpayer-funded lobbying and some other things that we've caught TxDOT doing. literally, I have such a long list of infractions of laws that this agency has broken that I could be in court every day of the week and still not litigate all of it. That's how corrupt our highway department is. And it's hard to get the attorneys and, you know, get everything together to be able to even get a case off the ground, much less multiple cases. But that is something that's available to us, apparently. And I'm trying to understand it better before I just march into court and do it. But apparently we can go in as citizens and go before a grand jury with evidence. And if they find that there's enough to indict, then that gets you going. So it's possible to do it yourself, but pro se is pretty hard. And anyway, we're working on it, but I don't know if anyone else is.
Thank you. Is anyone else? All right, that's fine because we're in a hurry. So last question. Oh, geez. I think you had your hand up earlier, so I'm going to go with David Ring.
David Ring, I'm a nobody. My question is for Terri. Now, this is for purely selfish reasons, but I think the problem with our society is that we're all too obedient. Yeah. You're talking about the tollway. My thing is this: I've got a friend in Dallas that owes like $17,000. Nothing's really happened to him yet. Right. Now, my thing is this right here. I've got one of those toll tags on my car. Okay. What are they going to do to me if I take it off? Because I'm ready today to go out there and take it off. I mean, that's part of my monthly income. What can they do to us so that we can all, as a group right now, stop paying for this? So what can they do now? If they can arrest me,
David, I think the question is clear.
Yes, one of the things, it's a process. So first they'll send you a bill, because they'll take a picture of your license plate. Don't we all love that, right? It's big daddy government out of control with these tollways. Then once you fail to pay within it's usually just 10 days is all you've got before they'll start adding heaps of fines and fees. Most of the time, like a person who owes $17,000 probably only owes a couple $100 in tolls. The rest is all fines and fees. Okay, well we find that a lot in Austin. I get calls from people all over the state about toll collection problems. So anyway, then they'll escalate that. Once you have a certain number of tolls unpaid, there are actually several bills right now in the legislature for the North Texas Tollway Authority to get the same authority that the Harris County Toll Authority and the RMAs want the same authority. TxDOT wants the same authority. They want to have their own court system. So they become the judge, trial, jury, and they're the foxes guarding the hen house. So you basically don't have any due process, and they're doing it this way on purpose. Then, if you fail to show up in court on your court date on these, that's how they nail you. That's how you can be thrown in jail for failure to pay your toll fines, is if you fail to show up in court. And one time, well, it's kind of been remedied now, but for a while, TxDOT was sending toll bills to the address on the vehicle's title, not the most current address, which is on your vehicle registration. So people wouldn't even get their first notice until they were already in collections. And then they'd have hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in fines tacked on top of that. So it's a really hot issue. We would love it if you could get on our TURF email list so that when these bills come up for a hearing, you guys can make phone calls and say, you guys are not going to have your own court system and be your own judge and jury against the people of this state when it comes to our right to travel, because they're going to take that away by just having you be a toll violator. And by the way, a lot of those are erroneous. Now, your friend might be doing it on purpose, but a lot of them are erroneous bills, and we actually have people, my pastor is one of them, who got a bill from the Tyler Tollway Authority and has never been to Tyler in 20 years. And they told him if he didn't pay up in 10 days, he was going to start having all these consequences. And he's like, okay, so I'm guilty till I prove myself innocent. I never was on your tollway. And they had this photo that looked like his make and model of car. And basically they stuck his license plate on it. And he's never been there. So how do you prove that